Let's talk about a song that didn't just climb the charts, it completely changed the game for popular music. We are, of course, talking about Bob Dylan's absolute masterpiece, Like a Rolling Stone.
To really get your head around how massive this track is, just think about this. Back in 2004, Rolling Stone magazine put together its list of the 500 greatest songs of all time. And what do you think was at number one? It wasn't the Beatles. It wasn't Elvis. It was this 6-minute-long anthem from 1965.
So that begs a question, right? What is it about this one song that gives it such an incredible legacy? I mean, how did a track that's twice as long as a normal single, packed with these biting, complicated lyrics, become this huge icon of rebellion?
Well, to find the answer, we have to rewind back to 1965, because this masterpiece wasn't born from some big moment of triumph. Nope, it came from an artist who was totally and completely exhausted and was right on the verge of quitting music for good. See, on the one hand, you had Bob Dylan, the undisputed king of the folk scene. People were calling him a prophet, the voice of a generation. But behind the scenes, the pressure was just crushing him. He was only 24, but he was so frustrated with the box people had put him in and so burnt out from this grueling tour that he was seriously thinking about just walking away from the whole thing.
But instead of quitting, he funneled all of that frustration, all that anger and bitterness into his writing. He actually said later that the song came from a place of hatred that eventually morphed into something closer to revenge. This wasn't just a song he was writing. It was this sprawling 20-page piece of raw, unfiltered emotion. So Dylan takes this massive, angry document and somehow distills it into this 4-verse narrative. It becomes this absolutely scathing takedown of a character he calls Miss Lonely, all built around one of the most famous questions in music history. But first, let's talk about that title. You know the old saying, a rolling stone gathers no moss? Now, you could see that as a good thing, someone who's free, unburdened. But Dylan grabs onto its darker meaning, a person who's totally rootless, aimless, and completely alone, with no friends, no family, and no direction home. The song kicks off like some kind of twisted fairy tale. We meet Miss Lonely, this woman from high society who had it all. She lived this life of incredible privilege, literally looking down her nose at the same people she now finds herself stuck with. And this is where that revenge part really hits hard. The narrator just relentlessly taunts her about this epic fall from grace. All her pride is gone, and now she's facing the harsh reality of just trying to survive. The sarcasm is just dripping from every single line, and it all leads to that piercing chorus. How does it feel? But then, something really interesting happens. By the time we get to the final verse, that bitterness kind of gives way to this bleak revelation. Now that she's lost everything, she's invisible. She has no more secrets to hide. By hitting absolute rock bottom, she finds this strange, almost terrifying kind of freedom. It's a personal liberation that really mirrored the desire to break free that was sweeping through the culture of the 1960s.
Okay, so you have these absolutely explosive lyrics. Now let's go into the studio and see how they were turned into music. The recording sessions back in June of 1965 were famously chaotic, just this 2-day pressure cooker where a brand new sound for popular music was about to be born.
So on the first day, things just weren't clicking. Dylan initially tried the song in a waltz time, a 3/4 signature, but it just felt wrong. The energy wasn't there. But on the second day, everything changed, and it was all thanks to a young musician who wasn't even supposed to be playing the instrument that would end up defining the entire song. This is one of those great stories of a happy accident. A young musician named Al Cooper shows up hoping to play guitar, but he's so intimidated by the lead guitarist that he quietly sneaks over to the Hammond organ, an instrument, by the way, he barely knew how to play. And what he came up with, just improvising on the spot, became that legendary, slightly behind-the-beat organ riff that is the song's signature sound.
And right there, in that moment of beautiful chaos and inspiration, a whole new genre was essentially born. This was folk rock. It had the smart, poetic lyrics of the folk movement, but it was supercharged with the raw, electric power of rock and roll. Seriously, music was never going to be the same again.
But, creating a revolutionary sound is one thing. Actually getting it out to the public? That's a whole other battle. With the final track clocking in at over 6 minutes, Dylan and his new masterpiece ran straight into a brick wall, the commercial music industry.
Back in 1965, the iron law of radio was that a single could not be longer than 3 minutes. 3 minutes, max. Like a Rolling Stone was more than double that. By the standards of the day, it was basically commercial suicide.
So Columbia Records just flat out refused to release it. They told him, "You've got to cut it in half." And Dylan, in this now legendary move, just said, "No, absolutely not." The stalemate was only broken when a copy got leaked to a New York nightclub. The crowd went nuts, demanding they play it again and again. That forced the label's hand, and they finally released the full, uncut 6-minute version.
And guess what? The public proved Dylan was right all along. Despite how long it was, despite the challenging lyrics, the song was a gigantic hit. It shot to #2 in the US. The only thing that kept it from the top spot was the Beatles' help, and it became a top 10 hit all over the world, selling over 1 million copies.
So in the end, Like a Rolling Stone was so much more than just a hit song. It was a declaration. It completely shattered the rules of what a pop song could be, in its length, in its subject matter, and in its sound. And for Dylan himself, this was it. This was the final, explosive break from the old folk scene, cementing his new identity as a true rock and roll icon.
It's incredible, right? A song that starts as this personal act of revenge becomes a revolution for an entire generation, proving that popular music could actually be art. It's a track that doesn't just ask a question to its subject, Miss Lonely, but to every single one of us who listens. So I'll just leave you with that. How does it feel?